Hi, good afternoon. We're so glad that you're here to join us today as we explore classroom strategies to support students developing their scholarly voice. My name is Barbara Benoliel, and I'm an academic coordinator in the School of Human Services. And I'm here today with Jenny Martel, a dissertation editor from the Writing Center. We are really happy to share with you some information that came about because we're both concerned that students are trying to develop scholarly voice. And our faculty expressed a concern that they didn't have any way to help and support that in the classroom environment. So we got together and created a few exercises that are both fun and interesting. And they're really generic, so you can use them in any class at both the undergraduate and graduate level. Each exercise is independent. You can insert it into the class, into either the doc sharing or into a discussion or even as an announcement. So we're hoping you're going to enjoy in using these and get a chance to try some of these in your class.
Yeah,
Jenny?
thank you, Barbara. As Barbara mentioned, we developed this presentation to just include some additional ways to teach scholarly voice in the classroom or in your coaching practices with students. We do have a couple of resources on scholarly voice that exist on the Writing Center website. We have several pages on much of what we'll discuss here today, but they're not exactly broken down in the way that we have in terms of tools that can be integrated into the curriculum. We also have resources for multilingual students, and this focuses specifically on US academic writing, which is kind of another branch or maybe a kind of a sibling of scholarly voice that is particularly geared toward assisting students who are multilingual. So these existing resources are student-facing and informational, this presentation will really be directed toward faculty and integrating these types of rules into your practice.
So the first week, and we've divided this into weeks so that students and you can look at where you want to place these. Each one of these exercises is self-standing by itself and can be put in anywhere. But we've got 8 weeks of exercise, and we thought in a course of about 11 weeks, you probably wouldn't want more than 8 different exercises. So that's what we've got for you. And our first exercise is on paraphrasing. So what we can do is suggest that you take as an example, and this is only an example, and copy and paste this paragraph into a Word document and put it into the doc sharing. And then you instruct the student to try to paraphrase the following, which is a quote from an article. The article is cited at the bottom, so the student can look it up if they need to, but it includes the page number, so it's easy to paraphrase. And then we give you an example of what the paraphrase looks like, so that if you want to follow up on the student's examples, here's an example of what might use as a paraphrase. And the goal is that they will use this exercise to practice paraphrasing, because as they're going forward in their work, we're encouraging that paraphrasing is really part of having a scholarly voice. That's the first week's exercise.
For the second week, we've moved into synthesis, which is so important in terms of developing a more advanced scholarly writing. So here we've, again, included a few bullet points that you might want to discuss with your students about incorporating published writing into your own writing. We've talked about how it requires critical reading and thinking. And we've also discussed how synthesis is an extension of a more complicated form of analysis. And here we've included a synthesizing exercise that you can use. And again, it's just an example, but these terms are good because they are both similar and dissimilar, which allows for a kind of in-depth compare and contrast that can, as its more sophisticated version, becomes this synthesis. So here we've included climate change and global warming, and with a link from each article for each term. And then we've, in the exercise, we've recommended that students look for articles in the literature from the past 5 years and then define the term with citations. And then again, do that compare and contrast and come to a conclusion which should explain kind of the nuts and bolts of synthesis.
I'm so glad that we did include that article on synthesis, Jenny, because I think that's one that students really struggle with. They tend to list articles, like almost like a bibliography, where they're doing an annotated bib and listing them in order, but not really looking at it as a concept that they can then explore different authors' views on. So to help them, for week 3, we've created a scholarly matrix that is not looking only at collecting the literature, but collecting a concept and using this matrix as a focus tool. So they would define what is the key concept. And then as you look across this matrix, you'll see that it includes which authors and a list of your authors of who's written on the concept, including the citation, that author's key point, and probably even a little quote that they might paraphrase later on while they're trying to synthesize the concept. So it's a tool to help students with synthesis by helping them to focus on a conceptual level versus just an author's listing of what authors have done. So this is a great tool, and we encourage you to put this into your class. It might be something that's a concept that's in the weekly discussion, and that could be the concept the students practice using this matrix with to help them develop that synthesizing skill.
So for week 4, we have included an exercise on theoretical surgery. And what we have suggested is that a student pull a key concept of any theory and then say how it can be used in a study. So for example, here we've cited an article on resilience. And you could assign this or really any concept which would be applicable to your course or whichever students you're working with. And again, have the student pull out a key concept and say how it could potentially be used in the study. So here, example of concept of resilience in a study. So we've got this example abstract and a citation that could also be used for this exercise.
For the next week, we really got creative and decided to create a game. There is a website that is cited there on the PowerPoint, playfactile.com. And in there, you will find a game called Walden Scholarly Voice. The whole website is called Jeopardy Rocks, and it is like a Jeopardy game. So here we have a number of key concepts for scholarly voice, including things like APA and sources and citations. And we've created categories with questions, just like Jeopardy, where you click on the amount and you can play the game. And then you get the answer and you have to guess what is the right question. And when you click again, it'll give you the right response. So what it allows is you can play this by yourself. You can put this in the classroom. You can play it by yourself and students can play by themselves. Or you could set this up with teams, with groups of students who are playing against each other or individual students playing against each other. It's a lot of fun. It'll create a lot of discussion and a few laughs. We're really hoping that students will learn the concepts by being exposed to the answers, because when you guess and you find out whether you're right or wrong, then you find out also what the correct answer is. So this is something you could insert into your class, into a discussion for the week, or also put it into an announcement and invite students to play against each other. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and just to add to the Jeopardy game, Barbara, because I think it is a lot of fun, and it's ready to go, and we've got all the categories and all the questions, and it isn't something that would even necessarily have to be a one-time use thing. It would be something you play around a bit for the last, 10 or 5 or 10 minutes of class or something like that too. So definitely encourage people to check that out because it's fully populated with questions and categories and is a lot of fun. So for week 6, we have begun an exercise about using formal language and tone. And this particular category includes a lot of different errors that we see from students. So the first that we address is to avoid cliche and colloquialism. A lot of students aren't even aware of kind of what these terms mean, but they're so critical to scholarly voice. So in this exercise, we ask students to note and underline cliches, metaphors, colloquialisms, and casual language. in the following example, and then revise and rewrite it to include a more formal scholarly voice. So the example appears below. And then here we've got the casual language highlighted and a sample revision.
In keeping with the idea of students paying more attention to their tone, we'll also have a week where we talk about speaking in an objective, social, scientific voice. And we invite students to do this by looking at the kinds of things that we tend to write when we're writing for more casual information like newsletters or even our own blogs, as opposed to scientific writing. So the terms, in order to help students, what we've done is we've sort of underlined and showed them exactly where we think there's an opportunity for them to identify the sort of everyday language that we use, and now moving it to more formal sense. So we've taken some examples and we've underlined where we think they should be paying attention. And then we can show them exactly what they can do and what are the rules and the errors of writing that have sort of picked up from the previous sentence, like avoiding making broad generalizations using always and never, and using adverbs that are sort of over the top, oversweeping adjectives like outstanding or obvious, and adding additional qualifiers that are really not necessary but are trying to add emphasis, whereas objective scientists, the emphasis is really not necessary. Also trying to avoid emotional language and inflammatory language. So we've given them here the list of the kinds of errors that are made. They've seen them in the exercise and they now have this list. So hopefully they'll be more aware when they're writing and do some little self-editing as they go through. This is a really good week for them to become self-editors in these areas.
Yes, and then continuing through week 7 and tone and formal tone, we want to discuss second person pronouns, which is again something that is a more informal tone. So generally it's best to avoid second person pronouns because it removes distance between the reader and the writer. It also makes assumptions about your reading audience rather than considering the reader as objective. So you want to use first and third person pronouns to enhance clarity. And this is a Walden and an APA rule to allow the appropriate use of first person. And some students are not used to using the first person. So we've included an exercise for revision of second person to first person. So here again is an example at the bottom of the slide, and a revision to remove second person and to make it more objective.
And then in week 8, Jenny and I were aware that some students actually have the problem of overwriting. Not that they're underwriting, but they're actually overwriting. You're using very long, complex sentences to say things that could be said very simply. So we wanted to add a week where we had an exercise on making really clear and direct statements and helping students to become better at being more frugal with their words and to be really trying to be very aware of what they're writing and how many words do they need to say the same thing. So we're trying to tighten up, make it simpler and clearer and much easier to read and to understand. And we left this to the end because I think we struggle more with students who are underwriting versus overwriting, but we wanted to make sure that we included this in our plan. So here's an exercise where we've taken the sentences that you've seen before and we're asking them to correct these sentences and make them more simple, clearer, and much easier to read. So this is the week that they're really focusing on ensuring that their scholarly voice is not overly scholarly, but really fits with what they are writing about.
Yeah, exactly. I think that overwriting is as much of a problem in scholarly voice as underwriting or casual writing. It's really important for students to start early on, learn how to again self-edit and to exclude any kind of extraneous information. So Thanks, Barbara. And in closing, we just wanted to thank everyone for listening. And we hope these exercises will be useful to you throughout your courses, or again, with students at any level. It's designed to flex to any student level. And please feel free to contact either Barbara or myself with any questions about this. And again, thank you.